And now Matt Ingham and James Treadwell will now talk about natural attenuation monitoring. And we do hope to have, I know there are many, many questions in the audience, so we hope to have time for question and answer at the end of their talk.
Right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. Hope the rest of the conference goes swimmingly. So I'm Matt Ingham with PRP. Me and James Treadwell are about to talk to you about the fun topic of natural attenuation monitoring. All right, so our presentation goals today are really to go through the guidance of reviewing NAM reports, or honestly helping you understand what we look for. I'm going to cover the first part, which is more about the Florida statute and the Florida Administrative Code Review and the criteria for NAM. And James will cover this slightly larger part, thanks James, about reviewing NAM reports with the criteria of NAMs, action levels, expected reductions, the time frame for achieving CTLs, NAM parameters, and doing cost-effective NAM. All right, so we begin this tale with the statutes, Chapter 376. Included in the statute are definitions, including the, all the criteria for the Inland Protection Trust Fund, where we get all our money. So first off, every good presentation starts with definitions, right? So natural attenuation means a verifiable approach to site rehabilitation that allows natural processes to contain the spread of contamination and reduce the concentrations of contaminants in contaminated groundwater and soil. Natural attenuation processes may include the following: sorption, biodegradation, chemical reactions with subsurface materials, diffusion, dispersion, and volatilization. Now keep in mind, these are natural processes and not man-made or augmented. So then long-term NAM, really just think of NAM that takes longer than 5 years. That's really all it is. So these definitions remind us, though, that NAM is a remedial strategy for reaching site closure, and like other remedial strategies, this passive remediation strategy should be evaluated for progress, just like we monitor active remediation for progress. All right, so Section 376, 301, or 30715 of the Florida statute has the site selection and cleanup criteria. In this, we have some of the criteria for LT-NAM, or really NAM when you get down to it. And those are that you really should have no free product on the site. So you want to have free product removal or some other source removal completed before you really start NAM. You're trying to minimize as much contamination as there that's going to continue contaminating, I guess. It needs to be cost effective, the plume should be shrinking or stable, and your COCs should be below NADCs. Also, the plume should be confined to the source property, but we can still do NAM if it's outside of the source property. And then if the site no longer qualifies for NAM or LT-NAM, the statute does call for us to resume active remediation. All right, so Section 376, 30715, C2, so literally says for long-term natural attenuation monitoring, if the petroleum product chemicals of concern increase or are not significantly reduced after 42 months, which is 3.5 years of monitoring, or if the plume migrates beyond the property boundaries, active remediation shall be resumed as necessary. And the key word there is shall. We have to do that. So this part of the statute sets the stage for what we call a level 1 evaluation. And really what that means is it also allows for the evaluation of site conditions to determine if starting or resuming active remediation is our best option. All right, continuing on. This same section allows for NAM if COCs are above NADCs when it's cost effective, when it adequately protects public health, safety, the welfare, water resources, and the environment, because that's what our job is, and the evaluation of site-specific characteristics that supports NAM. This part of the statute sets the stage for what we call the level 2 evaluation. That guy? Yeah, okay. So now we get into the Florida Administrative Code. Basically, I said the tail starts with the statute, that gets turned into a code, or the rule as we like to call it. So Chapter 62780 is our rule. And then at Section 690 is about natural attenuation monitoring. And then the first part of that, 1A through F1, is the implementation of the Florida statute, the beginning part of that, which was the level 1 evaluation. And we like to call that the applicability portion of the rule. So basically, is NAM applicable for your site? All right, so this second part of the rule here, 1F2A through C, is more of our level 2 evaluation, and that demonstrates the appropriateness of NAM. Is NAM appropriate for the site? So first off, you want to know if it's applicable, then you want to know if it's appropriate for your site. All right, so your level 1 evaluation, what is that all about? Well, first off, you need to make sure that you do the criteria for your level 1 evaluation before NAM begins at all, and you need to verify that you continue to maintain these criteria during NAM. These criteria are, again, free product is not present at your site, except where removal is not technologically possible and there's no fire or explosion hazard. Soil contamination should not be present in the unsaturated zone, except for if your leachability-based CTLs are exceeded. Basically, you don't see it in the groundwater because natural organisms are taking it up as fast as it's leaching. And then contamination really needs to be conducive to natural attenuation or it's not going to work. AKA, you're probably not going to do natural attenuation on something like cumene. So basically, it should also be unlikely that any of these conditions change over time, because that means things are getting worse for some reason. But if they do, you probably need to consider doing something other than NAM. All right, so level 1 evaluation, again, the applicability. Again, mentioned it before, but you need to meet it before NAM starts and verify it as NAM keeps going. The contaminant plume cannot be migrating beyond your TPOCs, your temporary points of compliance. You have to have a stable or shrinking plume. Again, if it's getting bigger, NAM's not working. And then additionally, data needs to show an overall decrease in contamination. So again, you do not want to see things get worse as you go on. All right, so when do you go from level 1 to level 2? Well, first off, level 1, regardless, again, you need to meet either or both before NAM starts, and you got to keep it verified as NAM continues. And really, you need to meet either level 1 or level 2. So the first part is, again, is NAM applicable? Is the site anticipated to meet closure criteria as a result of natural attenuation? I mean, if you don't think it's going to get there, don't do it. Background or applicable CTLs are not exceeded at your contamination boundaries. And also your contaminant concentrations should not be exceeding NADCs, although they can if you show that it's reducing, and we'll get to that. So, and if any of these conditions, these first conditions are not met, then you go on to your level 2 and see if those conditions are met in order to demonstrate if NAM is appropriate for your site. All right, now, okay, let's go. All right, so level 2 evaluation asks the question of if NAM is appropriate. So this part of the rule requires a technological evaluation for site-specific conditions, requires a scientific evaluation, pretty much a model of plume migration with an estimation of expected annual reductions of your COCs in your wells and an estimated time frame. So you need to know your reduction over time, and then also the life cycle cost analysis for your alternatives. And this level of effort, I'm going to tell you right now, is much greater than your level 1. So level 1 is the easy. Again, is it applicable? And then if it's sort of not applicable, then you need to show, well, now is it appropriate to go into NAM? And paragraph 8 of the rule sets the requirements for performing NAM and includes requirements for comparing site data during NAM to action levels and expected reductions. And with that, I get to turn the mic over to James Treadwell, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Good hustle. Appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. And James, thank you for continuing.
Appreciate it. I didn't need that at all.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'm James Treadwell. I'm apparently pretty important. I got this VIP thing.
That's right.
Natasha's a VIP. And then I saw that Matt had one, so I was like, well, can't be that big of a deal. But yeah, I want to try this at home. Can you help with the dishes? I don't think you realize who you're talking to. Okay.
Too important for that.
Yeah, right? So, let's see. Oh, there it is. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we're going to look for in NAM reports and how to maybe move some of the NAM sites out of NAM into remediation So several years ago, the legislature wanted us to put a lot of sites into LTNAM as a cost-saving measure. So the NAM reports, NAM tends to be kind of the auto button. If you're in NAM, it's easier to just keep doing NAM, but we want to, in the reports, look at the site assessment and remediation that's going on, and dates of when an excavation was done or when the system was turned off, so we know when PARM or NAM started. It gives you, so you know how many months or quarters you've been doing this. And recent NAM activities, and make sure that the criteria for NAM are still maintained. It should not be migrating. A lot of this has been done before it went into NAM. If these things have changed, then maybe something else is going on at the site, and it may be time to think about moving into either more assessment or remediation, and then a conclusion and recommendations, which is where you could recommend what needs to be done next on the site. So the criteria, right, there still shouldn't be free product. If this was true to start with, there shouldn't be, the soil contamination shouldn't have changed much. If anything, it should be less. We already know if the contaminants are conducive to attenuation. Then things to check for is the plume migrating horizontally or vertically, getting to a TPOC. And that's an area of concern that maybe NAM is not appropriate anymore. Is it decreasing? Is it still looking like it's going to make it to NFA by natural attenuation? Right, and is it migrating? Is it getting to TPOC or to the property boundary? And it's still below NADCs. So we want to compare to action levels and expected reduction, like this, somewhat redundant. Is it decreasing? Is it still supposed to make NFA in a reasonable amount of time? It's hard to define reasonable. I know some of the sites, your infrastructure is on top of a contaminated soil plume of clay. We're not going to dig up active tanks. So some of these are just kind of stuck in NAM until something else changes on the site. The action levels should be in the NAM plan approval. And for each contaminant and each monitoring well. So examples of action levels is, in your source area, is it higher, a percentage higher than your average? Is it a historic high? And cross and down gradient wells, we don't want to see. A first detection, probably an indication, unless it's just a one-off for some reason, it could be an indication that the plume is moving. So if action levels, some kind of action levels exceeded, then we would like to see recommendations, sealed report, and options could be, hey, we need to do additional assessment, like take some soil samples. Is there a reason it's getting stuck like this? It could even be continued NAM, because that's just the best, site-specific, that's just the best option for this site, or a RAP, to, like, now we can do something about this site, and we couldn't do a lot during the pause. We didn't have the money to do a lot of active remediation, and now we should be able to, hopefully, or any action that's allowed under 62-780. And sometimes it may be appropriate to resample within 30 days just to confirm if you're seeing something real there. So just one way of looking at pretty simple, just graph your results, and you can see this one is going the wrong direction. Okay, then we also have this this calculation spreadsheet that shows you the same thing basically, but it'll calculate a reduction for you per sampling event, per quarter or 6 months or whatever you're sampling it. You can see this one started going down, and then now it's going the wrong direction. So this, you keep seeing this, then we want to see some recommendations of why it's not working, what else can we do. And this is the same thing, but just you can put in multiple wells and multiple contaminants, and it'll calculate the percentage reduction for everything that you put in there, however many wells and contaminants you want in there. And this one, you can see this one's trending down. Man Kindle's another thing you can use, we use sometimes. Does some statistical calculations, pro UCL or any approved statistical method. As you know, probably you can't just totally rely on statistics and get your final answer. You do have to look at the whole plume and what's going on. Are we in the heart of the plume? Are we in the toe of the plume? Or whatever. And statistics are still useful. They're just not the be all and end all. So 3 statisticians go deer hunting. When they see a deer, the first one shoots a yard over it. The second one shoots a yard under it. The third one goes, we got it. So there's some limitations to what you can do with statistics. Oh, there's limitations in my skill at using this thing. Okay. So will the conclusions we want to see, will the site reach NFA? I'm looking that I'm kind of short on time. Okay. So is it reducing? Is the time frame for getting to CTLs the same, longer, shorter? So we should be looking at, we would like to see, starting to look at this after a couple of sampling events. Are we going in the right direction? After a year, are we just look like we're going in the right direction? And then per the LTNAM part of the statute, we're definitely supposed to look at it after 42 months if it's in LTNAM. I'd say that's the maximum we want to wait to, actually we want to do it before that, but it says we have to do it at 42 months. So we'd like to make sure we get that. Some of them we may not have followed through on that. So if significant reduction is not being achieved in 42 months, do we have money? Can we do something else, or can we not because we don't have money? Is infrastructure in the way? Is alternative closure, conditional closure, RMO 1 or 2 acceptable? Or we recommend active remediation, or we may just have to stay in NAM because of other site-specific issues. It said something about enhancement. If we inject something, we're back into remediation again, and it starts your clocks over, and you're back in PARM basically after that. But it still might be faster than waiting another 10 years in NAM. And this is just another one where they evaluated it, and it starts good and it starts going the wrong way again. 42 months, you need to be looking at recommending something else, or making some kind of recommendations at least. So we have a 2018 guidance on evaluating effectiveness of NAM. And this is where you could sample for some of your NAM parameters, oxidizers and reducers, nitrate, manganese, iron, and DO, pH, ORP, that kind of stuff. And if we stay in NAM, if that's kind of our only option at this site, we could reduce frequency or change wells or remove some wells just to make it more cost effective. And it can be the ATC can recommend, or DEP can recommend, the site manager can recommend, review it with the professionals to see if it makes technical sense. Another thing, we start reducing things out, you have to have a minimum of 2 wells, source and down gradient, and make sure we, as it says, maintain data required for closure. We don't want to get to the end and realize, oh, we should have sampled this well one more time for TRPH or lead or whatever it is. Make sure we keep up with that before we cut out sampling, and we may revise the NAM plan at this point and try to keep it cost effective if we have to stay in NAM. So this is kind of review of what we talked about, codes and criteria for monitoring NAM. And if we're not making progress, return to active remediation, begin with the end in mind, and always be closing. And this is just some of our guidance, BPSS 11, and we have a 2018 technical protocol for our NAM parameters. And that's it.
Thank you, James. And NAM is a very important topic. We estimated between roughly $15 to $18 million per year is spent on NAM. And obviously, that's if it's only generating a 47th quarterly monitoring report, for example, we know that we're just getting the same data. It's really not producing useful stewardship, good stewardship for the program. And back when this LT NAM statute was introduced, it was in the same year as LSSI. That was in response to the 2008 recession. In the 2009 session, legislature wanted to see closures. LSSI and LT NAM were the two initiatives that were brought in to increase closures. And LT NAM was brought in to try to maximize monitoring programs at 42 months, shift them into remediation. So please utilize that in your projects. We have a little bit of time left for questions. The floor is open for questions.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the presentation. Two questions. First for Natasha. We repeatedly run up against the $325,000 limit on remediation projects. That appears to be an artificial limit. It's going to really limit what you can do in terms of expending money on racks. Has there been any thought given to making that go away?
I don't think
This one's on.
so. It actually is a statutory limit. It's Category 5 and 287 Florida statutes. And the rule says that we will select a category out of 287 and do quotes if we exceed that category. We started at a lower category, and we have raised that limit to the highest category allowed under 287.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And second, I hear what Matt and James are saying about NAM, but we've got a NAM site that's been doing NAM for 20 years. We routinely make comments that we should proceed to active remediation, and we get told, oh, let's do another quarter or two of NAM. Is there a point person where, you know, we don't want to cause conflict, but at the same time, if there are sites like that that we're aware of, is there a point person we can report these sites to and maybe get a little bit more traction?
Absolutely. So I do want to say a couple of things is that, you know, we do have a lot of sites in NAM, and like I said, about a year ago, well, I know for a fact I brought it up here a year ago that this is what I wanted to start looking at those NAM sites and make sure that they're not just not attenuating, they're just sitting there. They shouldn't be parked and just monitoring them. It costs not just, you know, to monitor them, but there's also a cost to taxpayers for us to manage those on our side as well. So yes, we've made these changes. We've trained on them very recently. We talked about we're going to start allowing NAM plans for program sites as well. We've been doing them for non-program, but we've often considered the report, and we can still do it that way. Also, we will not be doing orders. The rule doesn't require orders for NAM plan approvals. We'll continue to do the orders for non-program, but we won't be doing them for program. But this is fairly new. We've trained on it a couple of months ago at our teleconference. Our guidance is sitting in that's finalized and ready to go. It's either in James's box for signature or mine. So it should come out any minute with updated NAM guidance for the program that we've been working on with DBS, leadership. Jennifer Rogers, our assistant GP that can be with us today, did a lot of work on that as well as Matt and James, so I do want to give her props for that. And I think we did a checklist and guidance documents. And the concern with us not doing NAM orders is that we're really going to try to share a guidance document for the NAM plans because of the fact that one of the concerns with us not doing orders is that they started doing orders because they didn't find all of the action levels and stuff in some of the reports. So the NAM plan reports. So since we won't be doing orders, we'll need those reports to cover all those things. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that for a second. So I think it's all happening now, real time, Gordon. So it's a great question. We've trained on it. If you find some reluctance, not every site's the same, not every site manager's the same on either site, you know? So there are, I expect these sites to move forward, and I've had some feedback, you know, from both sides as well. And so if you run into that, I would suggest working with their team leader, always. If it's, you know, teams 1 or 2, meet with Matt or Ken. If it's, you know, meet with the local program team leader or the private team leader. And if you need to, you can always pull in Susan for some of those discussions, or James, who works with all of those as well. Okay.
Thank you for bringing the efficiency improvement suggestions through your training that you do down to the site manager level. That's where it's particularly important. Next question.
Yes. On sites where you're in some long-term NAM or you're in NAM and the site is eligible for NFA with conditions, but your owner maybe is, due to site constraints, would like to still monitor maybe every 2 years or every 5 years. I've seen, you know, regulators on a couple of occasions say, no, you're going to still do quarterly or semi-annual monitoring, yet the site is eligible for NFA with conditions. Sometimes I don't understand the pushback into longer monitoring, so that at some point, maybe, you know, 5 years from now or 2 years from now, they can start looking at potential NFA, but they don't have to, where they're funding the cost, they don't have to keep going out there every, you know, 3 months or every 6 months and continue that monitoring.
So can I make sure I understand? Are you saying this is a non-funded, the state does not fund this work,
Correct.
and the owner wants to do a conditional closure?
It's considering conditional closure. The site meets the criteria for conditional closure, but instead of doing that actual closure, instead of deed restricting their property, they may want to go, let's just monitor every 2 years, and at some point in the future, if it gets there, we'll move on with NFA, a different form of NFA. But why push them into, you know, when a site meets the criteria for NFA with conditions, stable and or shrinking, why not allow them to sample it every 2 years or every 5 years and not be burdened with semi-annual monitoring or quarterly monitoring?
So I do think that that is very site-specific.
Correct.
I think it's site-specific, so you'd have to really work with the team, their professionals, and the team leader there. If it's a PRP site, it would be, if it's a funded site or a non-program site that PRP is overseeing. And you can find that on our PRP contacts webpage, who's overseeing which sites where. It would be the same process I just talked to Gordon about pulling in. If not, you would pull in the district or district and business support in Tallahassee.
Sounds good. But there's no regulatory reason why they can't do that, correct?
So I'm going to say it's site-specific. You
Correct.
saw the criteria, and you'd have to look at, is this happening? Is this happening? You know, it really depends on what's happening at that specific site as to if we can lengthen those sampling periods.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
I don't know if you're going to want to answer, but the ATC contracts expire in 13 months. Do you want to say anything about the invitation to bid?
This is an excellent opportunity for me to be very clear. This is great because I do have people asking me, as do other people, if we discuss any solicitation pending or in progress, the people that discuss it cannot participate in that solicitation because they would have prior knowledge. Therefore, I do not, and when people email me, I'm trying to be very careful how I say that because I really want you to understand that the way a solicitation works is that we share the information in a formal manner all at once equally. But they do expire February 14th, 2024. I can share that.
Well, the next question is being addressed here. I want to point out that at the association level, we are working on matters that the department can fix through policy with the department. Matters that have to be fixed legislatively are entirely different. So we want to focus on what can be changed within the four corners of our contract by policy. Next question.
Natasha, this is Neil, Gator Engineering. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for the conference. It's good to have this back again. I have a question about the $50 million coming from federal funds that are coming into it. Is the department being held to comply with federal acquisition regulations on the funds? Because if you are required to do that, there are certain set-aside procedures within the FAR that requires a certain amount of money go to minority businesses. Are you aware of this?
I'm very familiar with this. I also did the ARA grant for the department as an embedded contractor, and we had the Davis-Bacon requirements, if that's what you're talking about. This is exempt from that. This grant is exempt from those requirements, unless one of the projects exceed $10 million, and that's not our plan.
Yeah, no, the Davis-Bacon Act is certain for labor categories. The professional categories are outside the Davis-Bacon Act. So the federal acquisition regulations require that a certain percentage, such as 7%, go to 8A companies, another percentage go to women-owned companies, another percentage goes to black-owned companies, and another percentage goes to veteran-owned or disabled veteran-owned companies. Those are the regulations I'm referring to that are associated with federal funds.
So, and I think different grants have different requirements. The ARPA grant, if you want to read it, I can send you a link to it. It does have some exclusions as to what's required for these recovery
I would like
funds.
to see that. All right, thank you.
Before the next question, one question came in by email. With the recent score drop, many sites with previous work under the LSSI will be in priority score order to continue work under the ATC. Sites with previous LSSI work are to be assigned to the original contractor that completed the LSSI. Unfortunately, it appears that staff are not looking far enough back to find LSSI work, and sites are incorrectly assigned through the CSF. What steps is PRP taking to correct this issue of wrongful assignment, and what QA/QC measures has the department put in place to prevent this issue from happening in the future?
So if you have a situation when that's happened, it's usually brought to my attention and we look at how it's happened. If you're aware of an LSSI site that you manage that's now in funding range, you absolutely can reach out to your site manager and let them know that had it before and let them know that, hey, I think my site's back in funding range. But we've had a lot of people do that. For every single site scored 10, there's a caveat to the eligibility order date. Please keep that in mind. I'm getting a lot of asks about why I don't have a site, and when I look at it, it's not in funding range because of the date.
Okay. Another question up front?
One that was previously worked on under LSSI, and we recognize that. Can we have a replacement site?
So there are several opportunities to resolve that issue if it comes up. We have had that occur. I know of like 2 or 3 times over the past 6 years, maybe. And so if it does occur, it depends on where we're at in the process of the site assignment as to what the resolution would be.
Okay.
But we definitely will discuss it and come up with a resolution that works for all the parties involved. But please be proactive if you're concerned about one that you're waiting. Like I said, there are still 200 sites that we're trying to get access on, and then there's additional sites we're trying to get PCPP agreements. If they had LSSI, they usually have enough information for us to accept that as the LCAR, and we look at that, and if they don't, we ask for an LCAR. And then we do the PCPP agreement. So there is a process with site access, PCPP agreements, things like that, that we can't just immediately assign them. But definitely be proactive if you feel like you have one that came into range, touch base. But we do have processes to prevent it, but everyone's human. Like I said, there's over 1,000 sites pulled in.
We are running over. I see people getting up to lunch. We'll do 1 or 2 more questions, but I wanted to make an announcement here very quickly. If you are involved in industry associations that were part of the coalition, primarily that's now Florida Groundwater and EPOF, there is a PRP idea and information repository for questions like this. If you do not get a chance to ask your question, put the questions into that link that the associations have, and these questions can be assembled, consolidated, and presented to the department. I'm sure there'll be the next ATC quarterly conference call in December. The last one was August 25th. One more question from the audience?
Yeah, and Natasha, question for you. Basically the same thing with LSI except for LSA sites. There were a whole bunch of assessments done under LSA by contractors. Several of those were about to go to remedial action, and instead of continuing with the contractor who was familiar with the site, they were all reassigned. Can you explain the logic of how that became more efficient?
So sure, if you look at your ATC assignment process, LSA, we added that could be a continuation fairly early on, but it always had limitations. It was never a continuation forever. I believe originally the limitation, and don't hold me to this, might have been 2 years. And I think when Joe was the director, we extended that to 3 years. If the thought process was if they did the LSA, they probably had some, residual knowledge of the site. And so they extended that to 3 years, but after that point, they thought that, they would move forward with new assignments. The difference in LSSI is that situation is where an owner has actually recommended the contractor.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
So
why
even-
that one doesn't have an expiration date.
Right.
So even though the program basically was shut down for a year, we still hold to that cap?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Well, basically, the program was shut down in August of 2020 and was shut down for almost a year. I mean, work was not coming out. So these sites were basically stopped, not the department's fault, but due to a perceived funding issue. So it wasn't extended. And I was just wondering why. I know we're trying to become more efficient, and it just seems, I don't think the statute says has to reassign. I think it said may. And I was just wondering why that option was taken.
So I'm not sure what you're saying there, but.
I think I
so-
understand Mike's question. Basically, with the pause, slowing things down for as it did, with the 3-year limitation on the LSA sites, if there's anything within the department's control to be able to allow those sites to stay with the same contractor, that would be great, because the inefficiencies involved with changing contractors on a site is improper stewardship, or it's just very inefficient to change contractors.
So I do want to say that I'm not sure that the whole point was that after 3 years, the knowledge is not as long running if you did an LSA, and it's 3 years from the final deliverable. And it started out at 2 years from the purchase order issue date. So it really is it's 3 years since you've been on that site. So if the final deliverable, if you're saying that pause a year ago, we quit putting out new work, we didn't quit getting in deliverables. So if you're saying that, that's 3 years from that final deliverable, so those should not be an issue at this point.
So anything that can be done to allow contractors to stay on sites would be encouraged by most in the industry.
Well, there's advanced cleanup, that's an option. If there's the conditional closure agreement, that's another option. We have several options out there. It's in the 62772, some options for you. If you'd like to continue at that site, take a look at those. But I will absolutely, and I appreciate you mentioning it, I will talk with leadership about that requirement, and then we can definitely bring it up at the next ATC meeting.
There are 10 other questions on this PRP idea and information repository sheet that is online, that is available. Please track it down through Florida Groundwater, EPOF, or one of the associations. Put your questions in on here. If you did not get a chance to ask them today, we will consolidate them and bring them up in next communications with the department. I want to thank everyone for attending the PRP panel today. It was well attended. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Matt and James. We appreciate you all for an exceptional presentation today, and we look forward to continued progress for efficiency in the PRP going forward. Thank you very much. See you all at lunch.